SOM Live podcast, and I'm here with the king, Shane Williams. So we're getting to know people a little bit more, the talent on a personal level. So This isn't, we're not in gimmick, as I guess the young people like to call it these days.
Gimmick.
We're getting to know the talent more personally, where you got started, what got you into wrestling, the whole 9 yards. So we can go ahead and start there. Me and you are kind of the same generation. I won't give ages away.
Thank you.
But we can kind of talk about where we started at and what got you into wrestling.
Oh, man, I tell you whose fault it is my great-grandmother. My great-grandmother, she was in charge of pretty much raising me. My mom is a single mom. She worked 2 jobs. Both jobs, one job she worked on the weekends, and another job she worked during the week. And then on Friday and Saturday night, she had to work 2 jobs. When she had to work 2 jobs, then it was my great-grandmother, who I like to call my mamaw. My mamaw would come over, and it was all good. She let me play outside with all my friends, let me watch all the cartoons I wanted to. But at 6:05, the television belonged to her. And at that time, I saw my great-grandmother, who I thought, when I first was introduced to wrestling, I thought it was what she talked about. I thought I was going to see something like high school wrestling or something like that. And then I sat there that day, and I sat there, and she looked down at me, and she told me, "Shane, you need to be quiet. I'm going to watch my wrestling." But as soon as Jim Cornette and Ric Flair came on the television, she immediately started throwing popcorn. She threw her soda at the television, and my life was never the same again.
So that's kind of, where did you grow up at?
I grew up right outside of Knoxville, Tennessee, in a small town called Maryville.
Okay.
It sits in between of Knoxville and pretty much Gatlinburg.
So we probably grew up watching about the same things on TV around that time. You mentioned Cornette and the Midnight Express and Flair and those guys. That's kind of who I grew up with as well. Yeah. Well, some of the regional stuff like Smoky Mountain. I don't know if around the Smoky Mountain days.
Let me that was my first live wrestling event I ever went to, was Smoky Mountain.
That was mine too.
Was it?
Ironically enough.
Me and my great grandmother, Smoky Mountain Wrestling would come on TV on Saturday mornings at noon, after all the cartoons were about over with, right? So if you stayed around like I did, eating your 5 bowls of cereals, waiting for your cartoons to end, for your wrestling to begin, that was me. But I remember my dad, first time he took me and my great-grandmother to the Civic Coliseum to watch Smoky Mountain Wrestling. And I remember that night I got introduced to Bullet Bob Armstrong, who now, still to this day, when I hear bad to the bone, I still think of Bullet Bob coming out, waving his finger in the air and getting up on the ring and moving his hips and shaking his knees, you know?
That was mine. My actual first Smoky Mountain was at a football stadium in Saltville, Virginia.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, that was my first foray into live wrestling.
Oh, wow.
I grew up, like you said, watching Crockett and all that stuff, and then actually going to it. That was my first one. I think the main event that night was like Tim Horner against Buddy Landell in a strap match or something like that.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for Tim Horner. I'm sure he's probably still recovering from that strap match.
I'm sure Buddy beat the living hell out of him.
He did. Lay right there for this elbow.
So you started watching, then you grew up in Maryville. When did you start training?
Man, this was the big deal. Of course, there was no wrestling schools. I mean, there's really no internet. I mean, you'd get these wrestling magazines, and you'd see like OVW and the guys that were going there, like John Cena, Randy Orton, Brock Lesnar, those guys. But those guys are like, they're 6'5", they come from a collegiate background, super athletes. But for a kid that just grew up in Knoxville, Tennessee, wanted to be a professional wrestler, I had to get in my car, and I had to drive to every little nook and cranny that said that they were going to have live wrestling. To the point that when in my early 20s, I feel sorry for all my poor young girlfriends. No wonder they left me. It's because I would, every Friday and Saturday night, I would put them in the car, and they'd be like, "Hey, what are we doing? We going out to eat? We're going on a date?" Yeah, we're going on a date. We're going to go see some live wrestling. How many times I'd sit out in the parking lot and watch wrestling shows, or at a flea market, and there's so many different places I just wanted to try to get as close to the product as I possibly could. I just didn't know how to get started. To eventually, a guy right outside of Maryville, he opened up a wrestling school. Really, it wasn't even a wrestling school. It was really a it was a pool hall, and they were trying to bring in more kids there to play video games, and they had illegal gambling in the back, and then they thought that if they put a wrestling ring in the back, then they could get more kids to come in or more adults to come down there and spend money. So that's how I got started wrestling. It's been a hustle since day one. So like they put in the back of this pool hall, they emptied out this machine shop and they put a wrestling ring in there, and you know it's so crazy that even to this day I remember on my first day of wrestling training, these cops showed up and they were like, and I'm like, oh my God, why are cops here? Well, I found out the reason the way the guys got the wrestling ring, they just set their car on fire.
So they took the insurance money to buy a wrestling ring.
And they bought a wrestling ring.
It seems pretty legit.
And then that's how my wrestling career started.
Do you want to criminalize whoever got you into it, or does we're going to leave names out?
Maybe we'll wait for for my memoirs or autobiography to come out, and then we'll go that way.
It's pretty cool you mentioned that though about the magazines, because we're kind of the same generation, to where we grew up with the magazines. Pro Wrestling Insight or Inside Wrestling?
Yeah, I always loved this one. It didn't last very long. I used to read this one. I remember it was always on my workout stand at the gym. It's called Wow.
I remember
Wow?
They did the ECW magazines too in the same kind of. Yeah, I remember Wow.
Yeah.
And you get some pretty hot pictures.
You're right. Yeah, it's pretty different. It's pretty different.
So reading those magazines, to me, I mean, there was a local guy around here, I think, that was training guys at the time. But to me, I thought to get into the wrestling business, you had to go to either Kowalski's.
Yep.
That was the one you'd read about in the magazines.
Yep.
Or for WWE to look at you and pick you up.
Right.
So it's kind of cool that you found your way in.
Man,
I had to get in way later. But
I tell you, if I had it all to do over again, I really wish that there were wrestling schools. I can't tell you how many shows I went to, and the ring was, unsafe to even get in the ring and wrestle. Right? How many sometimes I'd get in some of these places I'd go to. The guys even know the basics or the fundamentals of wrestling. So how many times I kind of like put my health on the line, just to try to learn something. But luckily, if it wasn't guys like Ricky Morton coming into some of the shows I would do, or Tracy Smothers or Dr. Tom Pritchard, if it wasn't for guys like that, I tell you, I probably would have gave up as soon as I had to do my very first flea market show.
So
I had
what
no
was
direction.
was your first show at the flea market?
My first actual show was in downtown La Follette, Tennessee, and they had took a old place, and it was a flea market in downtown La Follette. They'd gutted out this building, and on the weekends they'd have vendors in there with their booths selling stuff, and on Friday nights they set up a wrestling ring and they'd do wrestling there. So.
And how long did you do that before you started getting picked up to go?
Forever. It seemed like forever. I remember riding with my buddy Rich Cavana to a wrestling show, and we're going to go do a show like that, and I'm like, man, I want more. I just want more in my wrestling career. I can't be going and doing these shows in these two-car garages or these flea markets and expect to make it and be like Ric Flair or Hulk Hogan or anything like that. What was it missing? And you know what was missing? Wrestling school. Like if I would have took the time, if I would have packed my car up, if I would have moved and went to the right place to learn, then it'd probably been a little bit different. But on the flip side, what I did get to learn is kind of like on-the-job training. It's kind of like, hey, we hired you for this job, and now if you want to keep doing it, you got to keep learning while you're on it. So like I said, if it wasn't for getting really lucky and getting to wrestle Ricky Morton, Dr. Tom Pritchard, or Tracy Smothers, man, I wouldn't have learned anything.
So they just kind of seen you there and took you under their wing.
I think they. What's really cool about the veterans in professional wrestling is they can really tell the guys that have the passion and the talent for the business just by how the way they carry themselves and how they act and how serious they are, how much they talk about it, or how many questions they ask. And that was me, man. They couldn't get me to shut up. Like, what do I gotta do? What do I gotta do to make it? What do I gotta do? And then finally, Dr. Tom, his smartest advice he gave me, he goes, "You want to know what you gotta do?" And I go, "Yes." He goes, "Well, you're not 6'5", you're not 350 pounds, so you need to be willing to do whatever it takes." I'm like, okay, and there we go. So.
And that's probably something cool for the people to hear that are trying to get into the business, to kind of have that right attitude. Speaking personally, if I would have gotten to the business when I was 18 or 19, I didn't have the attitude for it. I would have probably been blackballed from the business because I was a cocky little shit.
Well, I'm not going to lie and tell you that I wasn't either. Like, I'm not going to lie and tell you that, that to, you know, Ricky Morton and to Tracy Smothers and Dr. Tom, they're teaching me this stuff, you know, and I'm harassing them. Now, I'm harassing them because I want to learn this business, right? Because I want to make money. You know, that's the reason I'm wanting to do this, right? So on the flip side, in wrestling, you learn that all these people, we all work together, right? And then on the flip side, when you make people mad and they don't want to work with you, that kind of like sets off a chain reaction in wrestling to eventually you're sitting at home and nobody's calling you and you're just sitting there going, hey, one of these days somebody's going to call me. I'm going to get to wrestle, you know? It's
so
crazy.
when was that you got out of the flea market
I'd
and
say
started getting...
I would harass them enough to eventually Chase Stevens and Andy Douglas of the Naturals, they were coming to Green Acres Flea Market on Thursday nights. And they were doing some shows. And
was that before or after their time in TNA?
They were currently on TV in TNA, right? So when these dudes walk in,
I remember them on TNA.
Yeah, they walk in. They have I never forget. They have their ripped up jeans on, their Affliction shirts on, long hair, right, bandanas, and I'm like, oh, those guys are wrestlers. Those are cool. Look like two young, like rockers, pretty much, kind of like deal. But
and that's probably back in the time when an Affliction shirt had to be in the UFC or in pro wrestling to own an Affliction shirt.
As soon as I wrestled him a few times, and then I went to Dr. Tom, and I was harassing him, of course, in the locker room. I'd harass all the legends on the Thursday nights about what they're doing the weekend, because obviously I'm not wrestling on the weekend. So I'm like, hey, what are you doing this weekend? They're like, well, I got to go to Virginia. You need somebody to wrestle? You know, kind of like thing, right? But these guys, I was harassing Dr. Tom, and he was like, well, talk to Chase and Andy over there, and they might be able to take you on the ride. And I'm like, okay. So they came over there, and they're like, yeah, we'd love to take you on the road, right? Love to take you on the road. So that very next day, get in my car, drive to the mall, and of course King Shane has to have an Affliction T-shirt. He has to have torn up jeans, right? So I go and I get that stuff, right? And I get in the car, and I get 2 pairs of jeans, I get 2 Affliction T-shirts, right? I'm ready to go. I'm gonna be the third natural, pretty much, right? We get in the car, we go do this show. We get, of course, riding with them. They get there late, right? The promoter comes up to me, pretty much tells me he's not going to be able to get me onto the show, right? But Chase and Andy are like, listen, take your shirt off, get you a good pump on, and you'll be the dude's manager, right? You'll be the heel manager out there. Well, lo and behold, that's my first wrestling rib. So that as I go out there with the heel, they take my shirts, both of my Affliction shirts, because they were very cool. I think they split them up between one of them. And that day after I got back from that match, I had no shirt. I had to ride with no shirt from Indianapolis, Indiana, all the way back to Nashville, Tennessee.
That's awesome.
So they said I was too shy. So in order to get over my shyness, they said they were going to hide my clothes. So that's the story they told me now. But back then, I was freaking out, you know.
So with those guys, did they ever take you to any TNA loops with them?
No, I mean, I never got to go do any TNA stuff with them. I was always with them doing some like their maybe some like their house show spots or some like their little independent bookings and stuff. But I never they would always fly to Orlando, so I never flew down there. But it was always, of course, it was always one of my dreams, kind of like thing to go down there. But I wasn't ready. You know how we all are. Yeah. We always are wanting to be ready, and I wasn't ready back then. I was of course young and dumb and just ready to, you know, hook up with some young girls and party like a rock star wrestling wise, instead of being focused on what I want to accomplish in wrestling, you know.
So had the King Shane gimmick picked up?
It was slowly beginning, because it really took off when I went to Nashville. It really took off. Thinking in Knoxville that it wouldn't be that good, but of course not too many people talk about Kings in Knoxville, Tennessee. But when I went to Nashville, Tennessee, it's really picked up, because the promoter I worked for, Burt Prentice, would book Jerry Lawler pretty regularly. And then I knew, as a wrestling up and coming wrestler, in order to get better at wrestling, I got to get in the ring with guys that's been there and done that. Simple. Like, it's very simple. You put 2 guys in the ring together that's never been anywhere, they're going to have a really rough looking match. But if you put them in there with either 2 guys or a guy that's been there and done that, oh, the match is going to be great. And I got really lucky, and I got to work about a month stint with Jerry Lawler. That's awesome. All over West and Middle Tennessee. And if it wasn't for that, then another golden opportunity, if I wouldn't have just took the bull by the horns and just got in the car and decided to, hey, I want to be a wrestler, it would never happen.
How was it working Lawler?
It was super, man. That night, I remember I was super nervous. Doug Gilbert and Tommy Rich were giving me a hard time because they're like, "You better not mess up out there. Kingfish is gonna crown you if you mess up out there. You better listen." Kind of deals, right? So my very first time I got to wrestle Lawler is in front of a sold out crowd of 600 people, right outside of Nashville, Tennessee. My dad, and I'll never forget, my dad came to watch me that night. And in the ring, I remember it was the night before, I cut a promo at the Nashville Fairgrounds, like, I want to wrestle. I want Jerry Lawler. I don't want the comedian Jerry Lawler from Monday Night Raw. I want the guy that used to sell out the Mid-South Coliseum. I want that Lawler, right? So when we had the match, I came out to Eye of the Tiger, but he came out to his classic Rocky music.
Yeah, I remember that.
Oh my gosh, I was having flashbacks of Mid-South. Of course, it's 600 people, but at the time, I felt like it was like the Mid-South Coliseum. Man, every time he would throw a punch and hit me, that you could hear the crowd yell at the same time. It was super cool.
How was it taking the punches? Because to me as a fan, and then actually, training and learning as well, I think Lawler has the best working punch ever.
And this is how I found out why his punches are so good. He throws and plays softball, right? So he throws his punches like he's throwing a softball. Every time he throws a punch, he says he's throwing a softball.
That makes a hell of a lot of sense.
I'm like, oh, no wonder he rears back really far. He really turns his hips, and then when he throws it, and his whole body goes into that punch. But it's great, but it looks amazing. It's so cool that you go back and you watch these matches. And I always like to go back, and my favorite thing to do when I watch old wrestling is I always like to go back and watch and see how many actual wrestling moves they do. And I can tell you how many times I've watched Jerry Lawler matches, and he's maybe done 3 actual moves, but at the end of the match, everybody's up out of their seats,
And I love Lawler when you go back to using the Rocky theme and all that. I found this VHS tape at a dollar store when I was probably in 4th, 5th grade at the time. And it was Randy Savage's Missing Matches is what it was called. And it was him and Lawler in a cage.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, what in the hell is this?
Yeah.
And then going back and watching it, now, that's probably one of my favorite matches of all time.
That's the classics. I mean, that's the stuff I miss. And I think the reason I like that stuff so much is back then, unlike now, of course, now we're able to, pull the curtain back with things like podcasts and, other internet TV shows. But back then, there's so much mystery about wrestling because after these guys that you'd cheer for and you'd yell for and you'd, who knows, they'd make you cry, they'd make you laugh. But after they'd walk back through the curtain, that's it. You never saw them until they walked back out through the curtain. That's it. That's the only time you saw them.
Except for Jimmy Valiant. He's on all the time.
Except for handsome Jimmy, right? Dancing and boogieing.
So the King gimmick, so to speak, does that come from Jerry Lawler?
It came. When I went to Nashville and I started working Lawler, it's kind of like in my brain. I can tell you what it's a mixture of. It's a mixture from me growing up, being stuck in Maryville, Tennessee. I want to watch Ric Flair on one channel. I always loved it with Flair too. Would get on and do his promos, and my great grandmother would get so mad, right? And then she'd get so mad too when Cornette should be like, he's getting ready to get involved. Cornette has his glasses off, so she'd know when he's getting ready to get involved, kind of thing. So I always love.
That's a valid point that I never thought of. He always ripped the glasses off.
She always knew that, and that maybe when we were watching wrestling, she was in her 80s. She was in her 80s and would notice things like that. But I think my wrestling style is a mixture of course, Lawler and Ric Flair. Because I grew up in Knoxville, so I'd get, of course, the 605 wrestling, right? But I'd get the Smoky Mountain wrestling, but I'd also get USWA wrestling. So where I lived at, I'd get 3 different types of wrestling. And God bless my dad, because my dad was such a TV junkie that when he would get home from driving trucks, the only thing he'd want to do is lay around and watch TV. So he got us one of those satellite dishes back in the day. So at one point, I had wrestling from California. I had Madison Square Garden wrestling. So my house was wrestling central for
I remember
a while.
Catching those. And actually, I was talking to one of the guys about the big, huge satellite dishes earlier when it came out.
Oh, my gosh, I had that.
That's where I found MCW, which I think Memphis Championship. Yep. They had Flash Flanagan, Reno Riggins. Jeff Hardy was working there in the Willow gimmick.
Yeah.
And that was on there, like you said. USWA was on there.
It was crazy how much wrestling was out there. Once you see, us back in the day, we were just territory in the territories. We're just kind of like sectioned off. We didn't really know. I remember seeing pictures of the Von Erichs and being like, that guy is super jacked, and like why do I not see him wrestling Hulk Hogan right now? Kind of thing,
And it would only be what you would see in like Pro Wrestling Illustrated when they put out the yearly issues, and you could look and see what was going on everywhere
and you're like,
else.
Where are these guys at? Why have I never heard of guys like Gino Hernandez and stuff like that? So that's what
It's my favorite worker of all time, actually.
I'm a big wrestling nerd now, so like I love going back and watching old wrestling matches, but also following the careers of some of the wrestlers and seeing like what made their character, or how they got their character, or the different changes that their careers took.
And that's cool now, because back like when we were younger, you would either have to tape trade, or you'd have to find some best of that some guy was selling on a VHS tape out of his basement.
Yeah, and had lines all through it, and you're like, oh my God, come on.
Now you have the net. If I'd have had the network when I was in high school, I would have been the biggest nerd and probably never left my house.
You imagine, I remember having on Monday nights going to nitro parties back in the day, where guys would have, or guys, this is how big wrestling was back in the 90s. They would have, girls and guys would have nitro or raw parties, and you'd go over their house and there'd be like nothing but wrestling on. You'd party and have cocktails to like from 8 until 11, and then next day you're like, man, can't wait for some more wrestling to come on, kind of thing.
And that's what's cool. Like I guess now, when I was younger, it was kind of, you were the weird kid if you were a big wrestling fan. But probably when I hit middle school, high school age, you weren't cool unless you had an NWO shirt.
Oh yeah, dude.
Or if you had an Austin 316 shirt.
You had to, man. I remember going to at the Knoxville Civic Coliseum. I remember going to a house show and getting an NWO T-shirt, right? And begging my mom for like $40 to get this NWO T-shirt, right? And then I get it, and what do? I get home, and because I'm such a gym junkie, I cut the T-shirt up, right? I gotta cut the sleeves off, right? And I gotta cut the little slip down the front of it, right? So I can wear it to the gym and show everybody that I got this cool NWO shirt. And my mom's like, I gave you $40, and you get a T-shirt and you cut it all up.
I had the 6 one with the 6 ball on the back.
Yeah.
And then I cut the sides out. And then I think I wore it to like a basketball game, and I took it off like he did before I took the court.
Oh, yeah.
My dad was pissed.
Dude, wrestling was so mainstream then. I remember being in, I was amateur high school wrestling, and these guys, we had an in-school wrestling match kind of deal, and a guy pins another dude, gets up over top of him, and gives him the DX suck it. I'm like, whoa, and the whole gym erupts. I'm like, oh, okay, well.
We used to do, when I played basketball from probably the time I was like 8 until I graduated high school, we would do, everybody knows it as the Bullet Club hand signal now.
Gotcha, yeah.
But when I was growing up, it was the Outsiders and 6.
Yes.
So every time somebody get a good shot, we would give
Too
each other.
sweet.
Oh,
Too
yeah,
sweet 'em?
absolutely.
Yeah.
And then that's where my love for Sean Waltman came in. So I was doing the crotch chop and the too sweet at the same time. So.
There you go.
So as far as your career, I mean, I know we'll kind of segue back to it. Where have you worked at that you really enjoyed? What was your big breaks?
Man, I tell you, some big breaks. I got all of my big breaks have came out of Nashville. People I've met, people that have just given me opportunities. From Nashville, I got involved with groups like Crossfire Wrestling. That I got to make a dream come true there, where I got to wrestle Brian Christopher and Harry Smith in one night, and they crowned me the Crossfire champion in front of a sold-out crowd at the Nashville Fairgrounds.
Oh, wow.
So, so much adrenaline going through my body. I wrestled 2 times. The night before, I couldn't sleep. Right, I was so nervous, and I'm like, why am I so nervous? I've been wrestling for so long, I'm just so nervous. I'm like going through like the step by step. Okay, I walk through the curtain, I pause, I look at everybody. That's how nervous I was. But I do that. I couldn't sleep before I do the match. The first match, I meet Bret Hart. He hands me the title. I'm so jacked up on energy, right? I get paid, and I'm like, I can't sleep. I ended up having to go downtown Nashville, but I was like feeling like a baller that night. And then this comes full circle. I go to a bar and I still have the title, right? Of course, I want to go. I want to go out in Nashville with a title in my hand. But we go out and we go to this bar, and I wanted them, just because to make everything come together, I want them to play Bad to the Bone, right? Because my very first wrestling show I went to, I heard Bad to the Bone from. And so this time, I was wanting to hear Bad to the Bone, so I ended up paying this band $40, right, just to play a song for me. So I sit there with all my friends and celebrate with my title and stuff. So, but it's so crazy how just all this stuff, just you have all these memories and all these things you want to accomplish in, of course, in wrestling, and whether it be the Nashville Fairgrounds, going to doing that one, to TCW, Traditional Championship Wrestling, that was out in Arkansas, Oklahoma area. And then they ended up doing a show down in New Orleans for a Mid-South reunion. They brought in Bill Watts. That show, I drove 12 hours, maybe even longer than 12 hours. But I drove from Knoxville, Tennessee to New Orleans, wrestled that. But I got from that show, though, I made connections where I met the guys, Tracy Myers from AML. I met them. They set up WrestleCade every year. So it's like one thing in my wrestling career has kind of led to another. So, but unfortunately, though, I have all these missing gaps. So I have all these missing gaps because when you get like Dutch Mantell got me a tryout with WWE, and when I went to do my tryout was good. My match was good, but the only problem was where did I come from? Like, they're like, where you kind of like, where did you come from? Who trained you? Like, where'd you learn your basics at? And I pretty much had to tell them that I want to be a wrestler. There's no wrestling school. I had to get in my car and kind of travel around and learn everything. So,
but that's kind of a cool story.
It
and
is.
I mean, you hear a lot of the guys now, and they say that that's kind of what's missing from a lot of the guys that are on the big time now, is that they don't have those stories.
Yeah,
and they don't have that life experience.
Well, I was hoping that. Well, I'm hoping now with my career. What ended up happening a couple years ago. I always wanted to wrestle and perform on the biggest stage in the Southeast, because Southeast has been so good to me. And of course, I am super proud of being. Sometimes they're like, "You're too much as a Southern wrestler," and I'm like, I am super proud of being a Southern wrestler, because I'm from here. I can't get rid of my accent, and I don't even want to try. It's too much fun. But on the flip side, just with all that, and there's always, they keep putting things in front of you, with wrestling, with your career, how you're going to accomplish, what's your next task at hand. And I think that's the reason I'm here now at SOM is try to fill in some of these gaps. When I got injured, having to take some time off of wrestling, it's crazy how just 2 years you'll forget and miss so much.
Especially as far as the tryout goes, you said you had a tryout with WWE. Any of that you want to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, I'll talk about all of the tryout was really good. My life is kind of like, what I like to say is it's a learning experience, right? With everything.
Oh yeah, I've been there too.
So with my tryout, I got really lucky, and Dutch Mantell got me the tryout with WWE, and he said, "I got you a tryout with WWE. That's it. So don't hit me up again and try to get more, because the only thing I'm getting you is a tryout. So once they see you, they've seen you," kind of thing, right? Me, this is where I went wrong. I should have. My tryout was in Little Rock, Arkansas, right? I should have trained that entire time, and I did. I should have gotten my car, and I should have, or plane, and flew there, right? I made it a whole deal. I took my wife. I put the dogs in the car.
Oh wow!
Right? We proceed to go from Knoxville, Tennessee, all the way to Little Rock, Arkansas, with 2 small dogs in the car. Me driving, her in the passenger seat, and by the time I get to Little Rock, Arkansas, I'm exhausted. And then the next day, I got to do my match.
That's a brutal drive.
No, dude.
That is a brutal drive.
Oh my God, it's straight. Like, you get on and just straight across the entire state, all the way across the state. And then the next day, I was just so wiped. I mean, I could. My match was good. My interview could have definitely been better, but
Do you remember who you worked? Or?
Yeah, I worked Chase Stevens. I mean,
okay.
And here's the funny thing of the whole thing is me and Chase Stevens wrestling each other, right? The guys, of course, all the guys are around the ring. William Regal's they're watching, right? Of course, and he's telling us pretty much is, "I'm gonna let you guys wrestle, and then when I give you all the cue, y'all wrap it up." we watch match after match. Of course, me and Chase knowing each other, he's hitting me up, going, "Hey, we're both gonna get jobs, kind of deal." So we throw it all on the line, right? So, when not only am I tired for making this trip all the way out here, right?
That's a
toll
drive.
Right. He has just flown in too from someplace else he was wrestling at. So we have our match. By the end of our match, I remember I roll out of the ring and I'm like on my knees, like huffing and puffing, breathing. And who was the guy that used to walk out with Alberto Del Rio? You remember who was
Ricardo Rodriguez.
Ricardo Rodriguez. Yes. Yeah. He was right there and he's like, "Don't sell it. Don't sell it. Don't sell it." And I'm looking up at him like, I'm trying to gasp for air. I'm like, because we just got through wrestling like a 15, 20-minute match, and we're trying to get jobs. So we're bing, 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 bing everywhere in there, kind of thing, right? But after I roll out and I'm trying to breathe, he's going, "Don't sell it, don't sell it." What he's saying is, don't sell how tired you are. He's trying to tell me, like, don't let them see how tired you are, right? Because they'll hold that against you. And sure enough, when I got back to the back, I did my interview. I'm like, "So what do I need to do in order to get a job here?" And there's like, "You definitely need to work on your conditioning." So lesson learned. Don't bring your dogs. Bring your wife. Work on your cardio, right? So all these gaps, but all these things that I goofed up on, I would have learned if I would have went to wrestling school. That's what
kind of what the building block would have been at.
That's what happened. That's what I think was just missing, and I think they could see that. They could see what was missing, and then that's exactly why I'm here now, is to hopefully fill up some of these gaps and be able to actually get a job now.
I was told before we started this to ask you about Sugar Shane Williams.
Yes. Sugar Shane. Sugar Shane Williams was a gimmick that people were trying to put on me. They were trying. "Hey, what's your name?" "Shane Williams." "Oh, it can't just be Shane Williams. Come on. What's the rest?" "Okay, it's going to be tonight. It's going to be Sugar Shane Williams."
So what would that gimmick have entailed?
There was no gimmick. There's me. How can we make this guy who's going to be a baby face that really has no outfit? He has some biker tights. And he works out occasionally. How can we make him at least seem like a baby face? Yeah, we'll put Sugar in front of his name and send him out through the curtain.
It worked for Shane Mosley in boxing. So
exactly.
Maybe it worked for Shane
Well,
Williams.
it definitely didn't work for me at all. No, there's no sugar. There's no sugar with this Shane Williams whatsoever.
Besides the WWE tryout, has there been any calls from anybody?
Not really. But again, that's my. I got injured about 3 years. About 3 years, and it took me out. I tore my pec and part of my bicep wrestling at WrestleCade. It was the third match. I'd wrestled 3 times in 2 days, and I don't know how many times I took chops after chops. I have to chop some dudes, and my chest was like bruised from taking chops. To the point that a dude pulls me out of the ring, goes to slam my head into the table. I block it, and then when I block it, I feel my chest tense up. And then I grab his head. When I grab his head, I feel my chest just tear, and just like a T-shirt tearing kind of sound, right? And then after that match, I got back to the back, and I'm like, this is not right. Like I could feel it was hurt during the rest of the whole match, because when I got hurt, it was at the first of the match. And I got back to the back, I knew it wasn't right. And then the very next couple of days, it started turning blue, and then my entire arm turned black. And then I go to the doctor, and the doctor's like, "Well, we can surgically reattach it. How long have you been wrestling?" I'm telling them, like, well over 15 years. And they're going, "Well, have you took any time off?" And I'm going, "No." "Have you? How many concussions have you had?" And I'm like, "A lot." And they're like, "Well, here's your options. Either you can have surgery and we can reattach this. You're going to have some scarage, right? And then you can go back to wrestling, but there's still going to be some physical therapy and things like that involved. And so there's going to be some downtime involved either way. Or you can just, since you're already, you work out, you do some personal training and things like that, you can try doing some physical therapy yourself. We won't have to cut on you, but you're still going to have to take some time off either way." Me being the wrestler, I took the cheapest route and decided not to have them cut on me. But at the same time, I couldn't be near a wrestling ring without that. That thing inside of it's you can do it. Get in there. Go ahead. Get in there. You can do it. You can have a match. Just going to be a 5-minute match, kind of thing. So I just had to get away.
And with anything, it's stubbornness.
Oh my God, I'm the most stubborn too. Like I will keep trying. I'll make up like an excuse. Like no, I can do it. It's just 5 minutes. I'll do a tag match or something like that. Still, I needed to get away, be able to. How many times I've been hit in the head, over the years. How much stuff that adds up over the time too. Ugh.
And it's crazy to think about too, with all the studies coming out on concussions
Right.
and head injuries. Did you play sports in high school?
Oh God, I played every sport, every sport imaginable, but every one of them was pretty much to set up for my wrestling career, right? So it's like I did amateur wrestling, in high school, not because I liked it, no, because I needed to learn how to grab holds, right? How to grab a hold and stuff, and how to roll and do things like that.
And even going back to that, I mean. Our age
Yeah.
and in football,
Right.
growing up, you was
Right.
always taught to hit head
Yeah,
first.
hell yeah. Hit him with your head. Put your head down. Hit him with the hardest thing on you, the head.
I was
Like,
always
what?
taught to put my helmet in their numbers.
Yes,
and
exactly.
That is probably the worst thing.
Put your
you could
helmet
ever do.
in their numbers, right? And you're like, why is my head like ringing, and why do I see these little flashing dots everywhere? I don't know.
Oh, yeah, 9 and 10-year-old me was hitting people head
Oh,
first in football.
I was the same way. My dad,
90 pounds.
my dad would reward me like that. If I'd hit somebody really hard and knock them on their butt, then I'd get a sundae after the game. So how many times I'm just running full speed down the field, just throwing my head forward, no arms, just my head.
we had this device of destruction called a blaster when I was
Right.
in high school.
Right.
And it was these pads that were tightened up, and
Right.
we would run through that damn thing head first.
Oh, I know what
which
you're
is
talking
probably an
about.
awful idea.
Bing, 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 hitting you in
Yeah.
the head, right?
And then somebody
Damn.
would be waiting on the other side, and you'd crack heads with them.
Oh
So
God.
we probably all have CTE
Yes.
at the end of the day from
yeah.
all the dumb stuff that we've done.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure.
Or even amateur wrestling for people of our generation.
Yeah.
I was always taught to slam people in their heads.
Slam. I mean, I think the thing that I hated the most was, my body is trying to grow. I'm in high school, right? And then they're going, Shane, you're wrestling at 150, and I'm like, I'm hungry. Like, no, you can't eat kind of thing. And that was miserable. Nothing worse than going out on Friday night to a football game, and then everybody going out for a meal, and you're sitting at the end of the table not being able to eat. You're sitting there drinking water.
I remember weight cuts to where I would take the cap off a bottle of Dasani in
Yeah.
shop class and fill that up, and I would kind of limit myself on
Limit
what
your
I'd
water.
be doing.
Yeah, limit your water intake, and then after you drink your water, then you'd carry your water bottle around the rest of the day, spitting into it.
That, and I would eat salted
crazy.
crackers to
Yeah.
kind of dry my mouth out to where I
Crazy.
wouldn't want food.
Craziness.
But at the
man.
time, I think I was kind of a fat body because
Yeah.
I'd be coming off football into wrestling.
Right.
And somewhere in my mind, I was like, well, if I cut down to 45, I'm bigger than everybody at 45.
Right.
And I think I cut like 70 pounds.
Oh, my God.
In like a short amount of time.
Really?
And that was brutal.
Dude, that is brutal. Cutting that kind of weight, any of those weight kind of cutting things, especially growing up, and our bodies are trying to grow during that time, and here we are, calorie depriving ourselves.
And I'd never thought of that, honestly, at the point. I mean, I started amateur wrestling with basketball, which was crazy, but I was doing it from 7th grade on. So
Wow.
you think, 12 years old,
Yeah.
11 years old,
Right.
cutting weight.
Wow.
Maybe that'll be my excuse next time somebody tells me that I need to put on size.
Right,
Like,
right,
"Oh, I'll
exactly.
take
Listen, you
plenty
don't
of it off."
understand. During my teenage years, I lost 70 pounds. Like, jeez.
So any shout outs you want to give out before we wrap it up? or-
I mean, I'd just like to thank everybody out there that has supported me over the years, and with this dream of being a professional wrestler, like I said, it started with sitting beside my great grandmother watching 605 and watching her yell at Ric Flair and yell at Jim Cornette, and I mean that's the first time I ever literally my great grandmother. She was a super Christian woman, right? Grew up and was born in like 1902,
Oh,
right?
wow.
So she lived through World War I. She lived through World War II. I mean, she was
a lot of history. to live through,
right. So
man.
she had been there, seen that so much before. So but being able to grow up and to be able to be inspired by her, and then later on in life being able to go and learn wrestling from Tracy Smothers to Dr. Tom Pritchard to Ricky Morton, and to be able to learn from guys like that as a kid I just was watching on TV, And my great grandma, oh my gosh, she'd get so mad when Ricky Morton would get beat up. Oh my God, when Ricky Morton would be getting beat up, and then Jim Cornette would be sneaking up behind him with the tennis racket. Oh, she would come unglued. But there's just memories like that I think that, of course, that I hold really close to me. And then, going into the future, what I'm hoping to do, my goals is I'm hoping to learn a lot here at SOM, and of course working with everybody. I feel like I have wrestling amnesia right now because I haven't been out of the ring for a little bit. So every time I get back in the ring, it's kind of like I learned something new. And then my goal is when things after this whole quarantine thing is all wrapped up and over with, my goal is to get to NWA Power. That's my ultimate goal. I'm a big old school wrestling fan, and to sit here and talk about my great grandmother and how I sat next to her growing up, wanting to be a professional wrestler. I remember looking up at her going, one day, Mama, I'm going to be a pro wrestler. And she looked at me and was like, you better not, you're going to get your neck broke. But just to be able to make that full circle, to be able to go there and to be able to stand there at NWA Power and say, hey, Mama, here I am. It's time for the big stage.
And that is the ultimate throwback.
That is.
Honestly,
that
with
is.
the guys, they have Nick Aldis. He's a throwback wrestler.
Right.
Honestly.
Nick Aldis, all the guys there. I got really lucky, and I got to work Nick Aldis at WrestleCade this past year on the very last match at WrestleCade.
That's awesome.
Right. The fire alarm ends up going off. Right. The alarm comes off. There's the building sold out. The announcement comes on. Everybody needs to evacuate the building. The building's on fire. Right. And not a single soul got up and left. Yes, they sat there and watched our match.
That's cool.
But on the flip side, like I was so again, I hadn't been in the ring. That was my first match back after 3 years.
Oh, wow.
So to have your very first match back after 3 years to be against the NWA champion. Oh, if you lose, and what I thought about, if I lost, I come out of this with, if not anything, another learning experience to learn, and then hopefully next time when I get in the ring with him, it's going to be a better one.
Hopefully we see you on NWA Power soon.
That's the goal.
We're going to wrap it up here. I'm sure we'll be back here to do another one
Let's
sometime
do it.
down the
Yes,
line.
sir.
To talk about some more. I mean, we could probably just talk about stuff we grew up on.
Oh, God, we can talk about some old school wrestling for days.
Let's go wrap it up here. Until next time.
See you
This
guys.
has been Bronson with the SOM 505 podcast.
Cool. Boom. That's solid.
Good shit.
I got
I
some.
need a
That's-
I need a